So, as we gather, we take a moment to remember that FAN is a multi faith movement of individuals and communities from across Washington state. We are Buddhist, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Quaker, Sikh, Unitarian Universalist, and people of conscience. We celebrate our religious diversity and the unique wisdom that each faith tradition and spiritual practice brings to our work for justice. We also acknowledge that we gather across the state on the lands of Native peoples who have lived here since time immemorial. At this time, I invite you to call to your mind and heart the names of the Indigenous communities where you are joining us from today. We honor these peoples, past, present, and future, who steward this land and share their cultural wisdom with us. We also acknowledge the slaves and immigrants who have built and continue to build this nation through forced or heavy labor, as well as cherished traditions. In this spirit, we invite you to two actions: to participate in the Interfaith Network for Indigenous Communities, and during this season, to deepen your understanding of how policies we advocate for might help dismantle legacies of colonialism and white supremacy. We commit to centering the voices and solutions of Indigenous and oppressed peoples in our communities and across our state. So in a second, I'm going to just turn this over to Kristen, who will share her expertise on FAN's policy priorities for 2025. Just a quick word from the whole staff ahead of that. You will be hearing a menu of policy priorities reflecting the diverse interests of our advocating faith communities and individuals of conscience. As Kristen shares, you may want to be alert to identifying 1 to 3 policies that really mean a lot to you or to your faith community and that you can realistically act on. Our priority issues and policies are intersecting, and your advocacy on 1 to 3 will move ahead our whole enterprise of justice, compassion, and sustainability. We can trust that if we each follow our energy and passion, we will accomplish together what we need to. All right, over to Kristen.
Good afternoon again, everyone. I'm Kristen Eng, FAN State Policy Director, and I will be sharing some slides with you. Welcome to our legislative preview. Hope everyone can see that well. So it takes up your full screen. Yes, okay. Okay, so let's start. So the 2025 Washington legislative session starts next week on Monday, January 13th, and is scheduled to end at April 27th, but the legislature can always schedule a special session like they did last year, or at least they used to be before about the Blake decision, especially since there is the issues with the budget. 2025 is considered the long session. That's 105 days. It is very long, even though it seems just like 3.5 months, but it's a long slog. And like I said, it starts on January 13th, and automatically there's February 21st for the first policy committee cutoff, which is the last day to read committee reports in the House of Origin. And then there's the fiscal committee cutoff on February 28th. That's the last day to read in the House fiscal committees, which are the Senate Ways and Means and Appropriations. Anything that has a fiscal note or a bill goes through these particular committees. And then March 12th is the House of Origin. So it has to pass either the House or the Senate. And then we're back again. If you should happen to survive these Hunger Games, you go to the next level, the next chamber, which is then April 2, the policy committee cutoff for the opposite house. That's the last day to read in the opposite committee. And then the opposite, April 8th, is the opposite house's fiscal committee cutoff, and which is the last day to read from the Senate Ways and Means or House Appropriations. And April 16th is the last day to consider opposite house bills at 5 p.m. And usually at 5 p.m., right before 5 p.m., they take up the most controversial bill that might take up the rest of the night, like right at 4:59 or 4:58, because it's all about the time clock. Though it is the long session, session is all about keeping time and making sure you're using every minute to help pass bills. And people can delay that. They can discuss things a little bit longer than usual, write amendments. What you want to do is make sure that you likely save the last bill for last. And April 27th is the last day allowed for regular session under the state constitution. Now, all through the session, you can stay engaged with FAN. You can attend next week, FAN's Organizing Your Faith Community for Advocacy on January 15th, 12 to 1 p.m. on Zoom. You can sign up for FAN's weekly e-news, in which you will weekly get an update on what's going on in the legislature, as well as links to click to note your note on the record your legislative support or opposition to some of these bills. You can also write or meet your legislators. We will also provide some personalized Fans Action News Network letter templates. And please do attend Fans Interfaith Advocacy Day on February 20th. It's nice to see over 200 of you in Olympia. I wanted to say storm the Capitol, but that has a really different sound nowadays. But it's when we advocate together. If you're on the Eastern side, we have an Eastern Washington Legislative Conference on January 25th in Spokane. Now, the Washington political landscape is very much dynamic in the 2025 session. The Democrats still hold majorities. In fact, they increased their majority by 1 seat in each chamber, getting a 60% majority in both houses, but it's not a supermajority by the Constitution. Some of the new reps that flipped the seat was Rep. Addison Richards in the 26. So the Democratic majorities are now 30 to 19 in the Senate and 59 to 39 in the House. There was about a retirement or moving on of about 22 new faces. 22 people, and this means 22 new faces and new chairs. For instance, one of our champions, Senator Joe Nguyen, who used to be the chair of Environment, accepted Governor-elect Ferguson's offer to be the Commerce Secretary. So he will be moving on, and in his place for the Senate Chair for Environment is Sharon Shoemake. Senator Patty Kuderer won her race for state insurance commissioner, and so there will be another person in her place, as well as Tana Sen. Rep. Tana Sen has accepted to be the new Department of Child, Youth, and Welfare Secretary, and so there will be an appointment process for her seat. In the House, you'll see that a lot of the members are younger and more progressive. There is new leadership in the Senate with the retirement of Senator Andy Billig from the Spokane area, who now has Senator Riccelli in his seat. Senator Jamie Peterson is now the new Senate Majority Leader. He represents the 43rd Legislative District and has been in the Senate since 2013. He's recognized for his work on civil rights and judiciary matters. It should be noted that our two chambers of state government is being led by an LGBTQ member, both Senator Jamie Peterson and Speaker of the House Lori Jenkins, who became the first woman and first lesbian Speaker of the House in 2020. Another dynamic to look at is the change of administration in both here in Olympia, Washington, and DC. We now have Governor-elect Bob Ferguson with a new administration and incoming President Trump. They have both been at odds during the first Trump administration, in which then Attorney General Bob Ferguson filed many lawsuits and won against the Trump administration. And it should be noted, out of all the states, Washington state shifted blue during this last election, while others did not. The state initiatives. We were part of the efforts to oppose the 3 state initiatives on the ballot and won. In particular, the capital gains tax, people voted no at 64%, over 64, maybe even at 64% around there. And capital gains tax won in 32 of 39 counties, including places in Eastern Washington that voted more than 70% for Donald Trump. The Climate Commitment Act was upheld with the no on 2117, and this law was upheld in places like Okanagan and Walla Walla. It should be noted that these November election results read as the most pro-tax statewide vote in 35 years. There have been initiatives, there have been different bills, and the people were just saying no, but seems like they're ready. And that has been taken into consideration, serious consideration, by the Democratic majority coming into the 2025 session. Now, what is looming and what will be at the heart and core that directs this session is the budget. Now, Washington State operates on a 2-year biennial budget cycle. On the odd numbered year, which is 2025, the legislature convenes for that 105-day, and that's when they draft the biennial budget. On the even number years, the short session, 60 days, they allow for amendments, the state legislature, via supplemental budget. And this allows for changes in the transportation, operation, and capital budgets due to changes in revenue forecasts and other variables. The current budget covers 2023 to 2025 and allocates about $70 billion, a 10% increase over the previous biennium. And it meets, as in like, there is no shortfall for this. However, it should be noted, though, that there is a mandatory balanced budget requirement in Washington State, in which we are legally required to maintain a balanced budget over a 4-year period. Now, Washington State is confronting a projected budget shortfall estimated between 10 to 12 billion over the next 4 years, may even be 15 billion, some would say, with the increase of state employees' salaries and benefits. Now, the causes of this budget shortfall are increased state spending, as well as rising costs for state services. This would include inflationary costs and higher operational costs associated with delivering essential public services, such as social, healthcare, and education. There's also increased program caseload because there is a growing demand for public services, leading to higher caseloads through the various state programs, and this surge necessitates funding to maintain just the basic service levels. And then there's the revenue shortfall. Washington State is still a growing state, but the revenue that's projected has gone down. There's still more revenue coming in, but there has been, I would say, certain revenue sources that are underperforming, as they thought. Capital gains tax having underperformed relative projections, and also real estate sales. So this shortfall in revenue is accounting for the budget shortfall. Now, Washington State is still considered to be one of the best, probably number one economy post-COVID, but we still do need some more revenue. The outgoing governor, Jay Inslee, has proposed a $79.5 billion operating budget. Now, he expects to cover this budget by doing a new revenue source, a 1% wealth tax on residents with global wealth exceeding $100 million, which he believes will generate over $10 billion over 4 years. And he also would like to do changes in the business and occupation B&O tax to raise an additional $2.6 billion. Now, we have been working with the Balance Our Tax Code and on fixing our regressive tax system, and as well as increasing revenue for our states to pay for education, childcare, and the basic social safety net. We used to be I would say, the most regressive tax in the state at 50th. But because we passed the capital gains tax and we also did the working families tax credit, we are now 49th, and Florida is last. But we still have a lot of work to do. We have one of the most glaring income inequalities. We have over 100 billionaires in Washington State. We have very wealthy people, but the struggles for housing is real, housing and food security. And so the way to address this was for the wealth tax, to tax the 1% on those who have, first proposal was 250 million and above. Now it's 100 million and above with Governor Inslee. All of these particular bills on revenue have not been filed. We do not know yet what they will look like, but they're in the works. There's also the high earners employers tax, in which state and federal payroll tax for social programs aren't paid on income above $168,000, $600. And this tax would fix that on the employer side. Only the employer would be paying the above, not the employee. There's also the Affordable Homes Act, which would increase the tax rate on homes sold for over 3 million and above and decrease the tax rate for homes sold below $3 million. And in fact, even excuse the first usually $500,000 to 750,000 have been proposed. So in some ways, this would be definitely more equitable for the people. This is to raise revenue to cover the shortfall, but also to cover the services that are necessary for Washington State. Just like the social safety net. We have always been for universal free school meals. So every year we have advocated for more funding and we're getting there. There are about 8 to maybe 9 states that have already passed universal free school meals for all, because this would actually improve academic performance and help with alleviate food security in our state by helping kids, helping students. And we also want to extend funding for food banks and senior nutrition programs. There's a demand more than ever in food banks and pantries. And also we want to fully fund senior nutritious programs at $38 million because seniors are one of the highest growing rates of poverty. We also want to expand the Washington Families Tax Credit to youth from 18 to 25 with no children, which would provide about $350 of, we believe, life-saving cash because they're very low income per year. Next is the environment. We had such a great win on no on 2117. That was a no by 62%. Our state was saying that we're willing to invest in climate. And that was looked at across the nation. It was not just a state fight because we are leaders. People were wondering, what is Washington going to do? What do the people want? And what they want is for our lawmakers to address climate and have resiliency and invest in our communities. So one of the bills that we are looking at, we're part of the Environmental Priorities Coalition, is the Recycling Reform Act, House Bill 1150 by Rep. Berry. Some of these bills will have numbers, and some won't because they haven't been filed, but this one has. This one is to hold packaging and paper product companies accountable for funding recycling programs, ensuring consistent, accessible recycling for all residents while reducing plastic pollution and waste. This bill has been up in the legislature for a few years now, often called the RAP Act or REWRAP Act last year, and hopefully this will pass this year. And we are for supporting to protect climate progress, ensuring Washington State maintains and enforces state clean energy policies to counter federal deregulation efforts and to support programs that lower costs through energy efficiency for homes and businesses. There will be likely a skew of budgets and bills that would fall under this category. Lastly, we have the Curb Pollution Act, which is led by Front and Centered, one of our collaborative organizations. This bill prioritizes environmental justice by considering cumulative pollution impacts in the permitting process. Now, the Curb Act would require the consideration of pollution that is affecting health and currently going unaddressed. It would specify the communities that have been disproportionately harmed. It would also require lead agencies to deny permit applications for new facilities that add cumulative pollution effects and work with applicants seeking permit renewals that add cumulative pollution effects, with the goal to reduce pollution over time, while also elevating the voices of community members through frontline community participation in the permit evaluation process. Next section we have is healthcare, which is very much a topic of conversation. We support expanding mental health in schools for students. We want to increase the access in schools, including social and emotional learning, with a focus on protecting marginalized youth and LGBTQ communities. There still has to be bill numbers to drop here, but we do have at least one from Senator Nobles, which to provide a state network for student mental health services. We also would like to preserve the immigrant health equity, codify the Apple Health expansion, and maintain funding. It is all about the battle for funding. So we won these bills, And we even got 28 million last year, an additional to help fund immigrant health, but we need to actually fight for those monies, to maintain those monies, to continue, I would say. And then we also are continually supporting the Keep Our Care Act to ensure equitable access to reproductive health services, gender affirming care, and end of life dignity. We also are supporting universal health care by advancing legislative efforts such as the Washington Health Trust Fund. Next is public safety section. We are in collaboration with the Alliance for Gun Responsibility, AGR, the ones who wear orange. First two on this list are AGR bills, and that's to strengthen firearm permits. Some have talked about requiring training before purchasing and other such processes to acquire a firearm. There's also Senate Bill 5099 holding dealers accountable. That's to make sure that firearms are sold and managed in a manner that prioritizes public safety. So it would simply enhance security measures at business premises, like installing metal bars or grates on windows, mandatory video surveillance, employee background checks, and state licensing and oversight, as well as maintaining detailed record keeping and reporting. We are also part of the Washington Coalition of Police Accountability. And the next two bills are from that particular legislative agenda, which is Senate Bill 5066, the AG Investigations and Reform Bill. This would authorize the Attorney General to investigate systemic misconduct in law enforcement. This is so that there is transparency, accountability, and improved practices within law enforcement and local correction agency across the state, and that there are consequences, that the AG can have oversight. The next is the Independent Prosecutor Bill, which is sponsored by Senator Dhingra, the Chair of Law. This would establish a statewide independent prosecutor that would be housed in the AG office for cases involving police use of deadly force. This is to avoid conflict of interests in such cases in the local area. And our next section is the criminal justice reform, and I'll hand this over to Blake, who can talk more about these bills as well as our new work group.
Thanks, Kristen. So we have a brand new bill this year, and FAN is a part of the steering committee, and it just got a bill number in the last few days. And this is the ACE bill, which is an act relating to supporting civic engagement for incarcerated institutionalized individuals. So this was brought forth by Rep. Farvar, and this supports civic engagement for incarcerated and institutionalized individuals in state custody to promote inclusion and rehabilitation. This bill seeks to ensure that individuals can fully exercise civic engagement, including forming political organizations, communicating with community groups, registering to vote, and participating in meetings and proceedings. And this protects against punishment for civic participation and provides legal recourse for violations. So just a little background on this bill and its formation. In the last year, Charles Longshore was targeted for being civically involved with our last legislative session, despite it being done at the will and request of Rep. Simmons. So we want to provide care for those who are incarcerated to be civically involved and have access to their legislatures. Another case came up last year where senators and legislators were invited to one of our state facilities and then were turned away at the last minute without, in my opinion, legitimate reason. And so we need to have access for those who are in state facilities to civic and legal representation. So that's part of the ACE bill, and we will get a one-pager on the bill after this session and in the recap email tomorrow that everyone will receive. So if you got any more questions, the one-pager should take care of that. In addition to the ACE bill, there is the Judicial Discretion Act, which allows greater flexibility in sentencing when the original sentence no longer serves the interest of justice. And this bill outlines specific eligibility criteria, including considerations for individuals who are minors at the time of offenses, those with terminal illnesses, and varying lengths of time served, allowing for petitions to modify sentences based on these factors. And finally, we want to focus on workforce development and training. and expand trades, training, education programs, and workforce development opportunities for incarcerated individuals to promote rehabilitation. So this reduces recidivism and provides pathway to stable employment upon release. And if you're interested in getting involved with these issues and I think carceral issues will be on the rise these next 4 years, I highly recommend you getting involved with our criminal justice reform work group. And this is a group of about 15 to 20 individuals from about 8 different organizations that work together for legislative priorities and social action around folks who are incarcerated and with folks who are incarcerated. So I'm going to put a link in the chat if you're interested in joining. It's a quick Google form, but feel free to email. Kristen and I also are the FAN email address if you'd like to get involved. So thanks so much for your time, and we hope you consider these criminal justice reform actions this legislative session. Back to you.
Thank you, Blake. Our next section is housing, which is on everyone's priority list on both parties. I will pass this on to Elizabeth.
Hi again, everyone. So we follow the priorities of the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance and their Resident Action Project when developing our priorities around housing. So like the Low Income Housing Alliance, our top priority is the rent stabilization bill, which would help protect tenants from accelerating rent increases. We have a letter in our action network that allows you to just jump right in today if you want to personalize and sign, and then let our legislators know ahead of time how important this is to us, and we'll drop that into the chat. Another big priority, like it has been in previous years, is to continue to fund the Housing Trust Fund. We have such a shortage of housing in this state that particularly for people below 50% of the median income. And this, so we're asking again for an allocation of $500 million to support and preserve affordable housing projects. Along with that, there is a shortfall in funding for frontline workers who are trying to help folks navigate homelessness and find housing. And we know that many of those workers don't earn enough to actually afford housing themselves. And we also know that there's a very rapid turnover among those staff folks. So this would be the homelessness prevention budget that would be money that tries to fill this shortfall. So both the Housing Trust Fund and the homelessness prevention budget are budget items. They're not legislative bills. And that is the same with the direct cash transfer for youth that would support cash assistance programs for housing insecure young adults through the Office of Homeless Youth. And we know that we have a big supporter in this, in Claire Wilson, who was also at our FAN annual dinner.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I just wanted to say that the budget priorities for both the Senate, for both the Republicans and Democrats, I heard from Speaker of the House yesterday, Democrat, and Senator John Braun, who's the Senate Minority Republican leader, is that there is a paramount duty for education. And so they do want to fund education. They agree on that, as well as maintaining funding for behavioral health. But also on that list is housing. And so that's great to hear that there is agreement on these particular three issues. Let's see. This is the rent stabilization bill. Things may change, but last year's bill had capped rent increases to 7% per year. And with 6 months' notice of rent increases above 3%, and additional tenant protections, as well as providing a landlord's resource center with key exemptions to nonprofit and public housing and for the first 10 years of new construction. The reason why the House passed it um, was because of what they were hearing from their constituents. One story was from an elderly lady on fixed income who had a 70% increase of rent in less than 2 years. And she was wondering what she was going to do if they increased it another time again. Now, you can always increase your rent after you get a new tenant based on this law, but like I said, we haven't seen the bill drop and things can change during even session. So I just wanted to let you know that here's the basic bones of last year's, but things can definitely change as the session progresses. And now, and then our last section is the immigrant and refugee rights. We are in collaboration with the Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network, and they are advocating for unemployment insurance for all to expand unemployment benefits to include undocumented workers who contribute so much to our state in both of work and paying taxes, actually. And of course, continued support for the Health Equity for Immigrants campaign, supporting the Apple Health expansion for low-income immigrants and refugees, as well as funding services to promote economic stability and long-term integration for immigrants and refugees. We were able to secure 28 million last year for Department of Immigrant and Refugees to support asylum seekers. And now I'd like to hand it to Jess to talk more about this section.
Thanks, Kristen. Great. So is everybody able to hear me well? Okay. At this time, we are, very aware that the incoming federal administration has demonized immigrants and refugees and threatened mass deportations. There's a lot of speculation about what could happen in the first weeks of the next administration. And so in addition to the state policy that Kristen was just outlining, we also wanted to take some time today to lift up actions we can take now for deportation defense. And before I do that, I just want to highlight, and if you're on the call and connected with one of these groups, please do an emoji or raise your hand. But FAN collaborates with coalition partners across the state around immigrant and refugee rights. So Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network. And Kristen, if you could go back to that, stay on that one slide with the photos. There's the Tri-Cities Immigrant Coalition, some of you are involved in. One America, that leads a lot of our federal immigration policy ideas. The Jewish Coalition for Immigrant Justice Northwest, Wenatchee for Immigrant Justice. So FAN is connected with groups that are on the ground, that are in communities and also doing statewide work and federal work. And so part of this work for justice, we want to recognize and center the leadership of those who are going to be most impacted by the heavy-handed anticipation of heavy-handed criminalization around immigration that could be coming up in with the next administration. So we want to listen to our neighbors who are most impacted. And because of that, next slide, we want to highlight particular Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network. They are the largest immigrant-led justice network in Washington state, and FAN is part of their coalition to protect and advance the power and rights of all immigrants and refugee communities. And they're a crucial intersectional partner, especially because they are queer and transgender founded and led. So they have highlighted for us 4 deportation defense actions that we can take today. So I'm just going to highlight these. And again, these are coming directly from Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network. Next slide. So the first thing, I don't know if anyone on the call saw this in the e-news a couple of weeks ago, but we shared a link to this flyer here, that Know Your Rights with ICE. This, in 2019, Washington State, the legislature passed Keep Washington Working to protect the rights of immigrant communities from unnecessary contact with ICE, or known as Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, as well as Customs and Border Protection, or CBP. So what we know is that immigrant community members who know their rights with ICE, that's a first line of deportation defense, is people knowing that they have rights regardless of their status. And so when a community member exercises their rights, they can delay or prevent a detention. So I'll be sharing this flyer, dropping it in the chat in a moment, and we'll also send a link out in the presentation. But what we're really encouraging people to do is post this in a public resource area, in your faith community, other local community hubs that might allow you to put it up. This flyer is available in 7 languages. And one of the crucial things that in addition to all the important information about every person's right with ICE, regardless of immigration status, it includes Wisen's Deportation Defense Hotline. You'll see that number up on the screen, 1-844-724-3737. I would encourage you to put this phone number into your phone. This hotline is currently open from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. or 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. And community members can call this number to report a raid or sighting of an immigration enforcement. They'll be connected with someone who can share vetted resources, even things around food banks, in addition to being coached through know your rights if a person is encountering immigration enforcement. And this is also the number to call if somebody has been detained and needs in need of resources for loved ones. Another thing that I want to highlight is that Wisen does offer know your rights trainings that go in depth on this flyer, and they are specifically emphasizing those for impacted communities, so people who would be the ones targeted for these detentions. And so if that is of interest to you, or you know people who are in need of that, I'm also going to drop that link in the chat for their next Know Your Rights training. So while we move to the next slide, I'm just going to try to drop a few things in the chat here. Okay. And then the second link I'm sharing is where you can go to Wisen's homepage and you can download and see a variety of Know Your Rights flyers, which are really crucial. So next, the other invitation that Wisen gives us is to form or join a rapid response team. And I think I see Jamie Krish is on here. Jamie's been involved in rapid response. If there's other people on the call who've been involved, raise your hand or do an emoji. But these are groups of trained individuals who are activated by Wisen to document and provide support to affected families when activities, raids, or detentions by immigration agents are reported in their communities. And so the training, it's a 2-hour training that is provided online, and then Wisen works with you to connect you with a team in your area that gets activated locally to respond if this occurs in your community. And this is a longer term commitment and one where that is especially great for people who have flexibility with their schedule and can be contacted and be ready to go to show up and see if ICE activity is occurring. But I'm going to, if that is of interest to you, I'm going to put in the chat now their next 2 links for their next 2 rapid response trainings. Those are especially geared toward people who are U.S. citizens and can use their privilege to show up and document ICE activity. Slide. Okay. Then next slide. Thanks, Kristen. Another thing that Wisen is inviting us to do is to support or host a fundraiser for the Fair Fight Bond Fund. This fund gives immigrants in Washington a fighting chance if they are detained. The fund provides bond money that allows immigrants to go back to their lives and families to look for a lawyer, to build their case to gain status. I'm newer in this area, so just a reminder for folks, the bond is a cash deposit made with the government on behalf of a person, in this case, detained in an immigration case. And it's a guarantee that they'll show up for their subsequent proceedings once they're released from custody. Not every immigrant who's detained gets the opportunity to be bonded, but for those who are, it's a really crucial opportunity for them to be able to successfully fight deportation. We know that an immigration bond is usually between $5,000 to $12,000, but it can be even up to $25,000. And so that is a huge cost for most people, can't afford to post bond. And so people are ending up incarcerated in the Northwest Detention Center in Tacoma, which is horrible conditions, and really prevents people from fighting their case when they are in detention. We know that people released from detention are 5 times as likely to secure an attorney. If you have an attorney, you're twice as likely to win your case. So this fund is really freeing people up to fight for their freedom. At this point, 118 individuals have been bonded to date from this fund. And the really cool thing is that after the case is resolved, that bond money returns to the Fair Fight Bond Fund and helps more detained individuals. And this is community sourced, and if people are hosting a part, even $5 is part of something that is helping people advocate for themselves and stay in the communities that they call home. Next slide, Kristen. So the last ask that Wizen shares as kind of a way to be part of their deportation defense is to think about becoming an accompaniment volunteer. And this one is different in rapid response in that there's a lot of overlap, but the person in this case is supporting and accompanying immigrants as they attend immigration hearings, ICE check-ins, or if they need to go to the courthouse for civil matters. So these volunteers are providing support both for that person who's navigating the system, but also that volunteer is ready to hold immigration and courthouse personnel authorities accountable. And we know that when there are neighbors who are standing in solidarity with immigrants facing deportation, this sends a message to immigration judges, to ICE officers, and government attorneys that there's a community that cares and is mobilized against deportation. This is a volunteer area where they especially can use bilingual volunteers, and they will be hosting a program series.
There's a salad in the
And
and there's some toast in the toast.
yeah, great. If everyone can mute, that'd be great. They will be hosting a 2-part series in February for this accompaniment, if you want to be involved in that. And so I will just drop that in the link chat now. Great, okay. Final slide, Kristen. Thank you. So I just, again, wanted to come back. I realized, went into depth on these 4 different actions that Wizen is inviting us to. But if you are subscribed to the FAN e-news, you will be getting the latest updates that are related to deportation defense. It's going to be folding in our state immigrant advocacy. And the other thing that I do want to highlight is that we are working on a Action Network letter that we will share in the coming days and weeks. Given that we're aware of the threats of mass deportation, we know that even if this is, an executive order that is made, Congress needs to authorize funding for mass deportations. So FAN, along with our coalition partners, will also be coming out strong at the federal level for us to advocate, do not fund mass deportations. So we will be sending out a template for that for you to personalize and share. And again, you can post I'll also share a link for just the 4 deportation defense actions, posting and sharing the Know Your Rights flyers with ICE. I'll be putting them in the chat, but again, they will be available for you in the following email after this presentation as well. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jess, and thank you, everyone. Again, here's a way to get involved with FAN through the session. Please do sign up for our weekly e-news and Interfaith Advocacy Days. And I'm going to stop sharing here so we can talk. And if there are questions or comments from any in our network, please raise your hand with regards to the legislative agenda or the legislative session. Just please click on the raise hand.
I think Barbara had a question. Go ahead, Barbara.
Thanks, but there's a march on January 30th. Weisson's having a march in Olympia from 1:30 to 3. It's a rally, a march and a rally on January 30th. And I think a lot of the churches, I'm with Keystone UCC, but I think a lot of the churches have received some notice on that. So anyway, we'll be attending. So thank you.
Thank you, Barb.
That's awesome, Barbara. And that's also connected to Immigrant and Refugee Advocacy Day too, as well. So awesome.
Okay.
We can put that link.
Thank you.
We will definitely be sending as part of our e-newsletter and sometimes on our website, the advocacy days of our partners, whether that's Washington Low Income Housing Association, Environmental Lobby Days, NAMI Mental Health Days. We love participating in everyone else's lobby days, and we invite everyone to participate in ours, Interfaith Advocacy Day. We loved it when the Poor People's Campaign joined us. It was such a great sight and fun. I see Laura has her hand up.
Yeah, maybe you said this already, but if we've signed up for the action alerts, when do you expect the first one to come out?
I probably Friday. I'm thinking
As in tomorrow?
Oh no, Friday next week.
Oh,
I'll see if I'll scan some things already, and if we need to do like one beforehand, we'll put one in. But
okay.
I think for next week, there's a lot of testimonies on budget. On my other hat, I will testify on the budget. But there will be other ways to get involved, but I will take a look and scan what already can you make a comment on. But usually our e-news comes out weekly on Fridays. And we may have some guest editorials. I think Blake said he will send something about the ACE bill or Judicial Discretion Act. So we'll have a focus at times in each e-news. But I want to let people know, usually the second half session, I always write about how it's all about the budget. It's all about the Benjamins, the money, the money, the money. And this year, it's even more intense. And it starts from day one. It's not even halfway through session. It is now, let your legislators, if you see them or anyone know that what are your budget priorities? What are you willing to, what do you want to fund it? And most importantly, what you don't want cut, because they are looking for cuts. They will cut. Both Democrats and Republicans said that, even Democrats say, despite we are a push for revenue, new revenue, we will cut. So they are looking to cut things that they feel would be less a priority. I don't want to say less important, less impactful or not significant, but if it's not a priority, it's willing to be on the chopping block for them. So please do inform your legislators of what is a priority and what you want to have maintained, because there will be cuts. And I just wanted to say that the governor-elect will be inaugurated on January 15th. There also will be a governor's ball on January 15th. Start of session is January 13th, and there's already a Ways and Means hearing already. So it goes by really fast, though it's long, it goes by really fast. And who knows if there will be a special session, but this is definitely crunch time in terms of budget. And since nobody's raising their hand, I will fill a little bit more of this
I have
air.
another,
Oh, go ahead. Good.
I have another comment because I'm trying really hard to think how in the world do you prioritize what to cut, not to cut. And all I can think of is if there's something we can do to help people that will keep them as taxpayers, that in a way is supporting the budget. So any way to help, help people like maybe get into homes where they can get a job or anything that's going to help people to stay and work and contribute to the budget. Just an idea.
Definitely. I mean, if people have housing and even short-term housing or whatnot, it will likely get them back on their feet. So I see Jess has her hand up.
Another thing I was just going to throw in, I was thinking about something that Kristen had said before, is the difference between fighting for funding for programs that exist versus asking for funding for programs that haven't yet been created. And so I'm especially thinking about all the work that we did for the Apple Health expansion, and the foot is in the door there, versus the unemployment insurance for all that has not been funded yet. So that's something I'm thinking about.
Okay. And who will, oh, I see. Did Barbara have her hand up or is she just waving? Oh, were you going to close this up, Elizabeth, or was it Joyce?
I wasn't, but I believe we've got Joyce here.
Oh, Joyce is back. Okay.
I'm just scrambling to look for the registration link for our webinar, interactive webinar on next Wednesday for around organizing your faith community. Hopefully I can get that in the next minute.
And I did want to just put my email is in the chat. If you have any further questions or if you want to talk about bills or issues that are not even on our legislative agenda that impacts your communities, please let me know, or specific questions you had about a bill or you want to understand more what's going on with budget, please just, you can email or you can also, I'm also old fashioned. I like a phone call. It's fine too.
Well, why don't I go
Okay.
ahead and close up our time and invite everyone to reach out to us, please, if you have any further questions. And as you know, every Friday we'll send out calls to action and more updated news as we go during this session. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you so much to our wonderful fan staff for doing this work and for continuing to organize us and continuing to keep us focused on the things that are the common good for all of us. So wanted to thank you all for your time and hope to see you at our next events. Thank you so much, everyone.